Welcome everybody. Today we have another Meet the Chief, and we're very fortunate to have Chief Master Sergeant Retired Jay Willis. He's joining us from Georgia, and we're gonna start with just having you tell us a little bit about where you started things off, where you're born, where you're raised, and what led you to the Air Force. And you have a very unique story to share with us about how you came to enter the Air Force bands.
I do. As a matter of fact, I was born in Indianapolis, and my family and I, we lived about 15 miles southwest of there, and I went to Mooresville High School there in Indiana. And prior to graduation in 1980, the Air Force band from Chanute came through the area and did a recruiting show. And I was heavily involved in the music program there at the high school. And I thought, wow, I'd love to do that. And I thought, I wonder what it takes to do that. So I graduated high school and I thought, you know, I don't know if I want to join the military. I really don't know what I want to do. So I thought I wanted to go to school and play basketball, go to college and play ball. So I stayed out a year. Then I went for broadcasting, and the economy was very challenging at that time. And I thought, I'm not getting anywhere here. So then I thought, you know, let me just go back and rethink this Air Force deal of joining the service at all. So initially, I talked to my uncle about joining the Army, and he said, no, you don't want to do that. And he was still in the Guard at that point, the Army Guard, but he had been active duty Army and transitioned to the Guard. And he said, if you want the best quarters, if you want the best meals, if you want the best sites to be stationed at, join the Air Force. So I went down and talked to a recruiter, and I asked them about getting an audition with the band, either at Chanute or Wright-Patterson. And he said, well, let me see what I can do. And he said, yeah, I'm not going to be able to do that. They don't have an open schedule right now. So he said, but you were in broadcasting. And he said, I've got a need here in the communications field. And he said, how about coming to Indianapolis and taking this test for me? And it was just a very quick, we call it the Diddy Bop test, just to go through and see if you could pick up, you know, what was what. And so apparently I scored very high on it. And he said, you know, I can lock you in today. You can get to the Air Force. And if you want to transition to the band or try to audition later, you can do that. I thought, well, at least I have a guaranteed job. So I joined the Air Force on my sister's birthday. And then 2.5 months later, I shipped out. And in June of '83, I started in the Air Force and had no idea where it was going to take me. And on the 6th day of training, when you meet with your job counselor, he said, hey, look, I have a friend here in the audition staff with the Band of the West, and they're actually looking for a vocalist. And I'm looking at your file, and you've got a lot of experience. He said, would you be interested in auditioning? And I said, man, would I? And so it took me 3 times by the time I had a voice after being barked at by the TIs. I got through the audition, and before I got out of basic training, my orders were changed to the band career field.
Fantastic. And tell us a little bit about the actual audition and whatnot, because we talked on the phone. I think because of the participation in BMT, your voice may have been a little bit hoarse at times because you're yelling all the time, and so
Yeah, it was shot, and I can remember, you know, I could do some things well with the audition, some things I did not do well. And the commander at that time was a captain by the name of Alan Bonner. And he brought me in the office after the audition, after the 3rd time I'd come in and finish the audition. And he said, you know, he said, I'm not really too sure, but the guys in the band love you. They think you show a lot of potential. I do too. He said, but I'm going to let the choice be yours. And so if you're willing to put in the work and do what it takes to be successful in the band career field, I say welcome. And if not, I wish you the best of luck in your guaranteed career field. And I said, sir, I believe I'd rather be in the band.
Yep.
and that opened the door.
So now you finished basic training. What was your first assignment?
My first assignment was right there at Lackland Air Force Base. I spent the next 4 years there.
Yeah.
And had some really interesting opportunities there. I started off in a pop group. It was called New Approach when I first joined. Within a year, they'd been I guess, regrouped. And so they came out as Blue Thunder. And the first album I ever cut in the Air Force was an album with Blue Thunder. And it was in the fall of '84. And then I got moved to the jazz band. They decided to close the pop group down. And so I got moved to the jazz band, and I was terrified. I'd done a lot of different things before, but singing in a jazz band was not something that came natural to me at that point. So I did a lot of listening, and I talked to a lot of folks that were in the career field. Just, what do you do for material? And so some of the guys in the band, took me under the wing and said, yeah, listen to guys like Frank Sinatra, listen to Diane Shure. So I started putting my ears on a lot of different things. And one of the big first opportunities I had with them was with the jazz band at I think it was then the NAJE. And we were performing in Dallas, and I was on stage, and I was supposed to come out and sing Mac the Knife. And I came out, we got through the first verse, and at the tail end of the first verse, I totally blanked. And so I sang, yeah, I forgot the words. And I turned around, and the sax section started singing to me, oh, the shark. And we got through it, and I didn't know the story about Ella Fitzgerald forgetting the lyrics and then scat singing, but it all played well. I guess they just thought it was part of the act. So they covered me, I got covered, and we had a great time, and was one of my first opportunities with the jazz band. So I enjoyed it, and then I went to the concert band for a while, and then I had an opportunity to go to Alaska. And that was in '87. So transitioned up there and was really interesting. But I will say, before I left Lackland, though, probably one of the hardest moments came when Challenger exploded. And they asked the band at Lackland to come out and do the memorial service. And so I was fortunate enough to be part of that grouping to go out there. Went with the full band out there, and it was overwhelming. It was impressive, just the complexity of the whole operation. It was overwhelming emotionally just to see, here's our nation's heroes who have now gone, and it's not lost on you that the whole nation's going to be watching while we do this service. Very somber occasion, but one that I never forgot either. So,
and it probably you can maybe speak to this, but it really speaks to the professionalism that it takes to be able to perform in events like that, where it is very emotionally charged and grabs at your heartstrings, and so you use that to harness that in your performance. But it certainly can be a challenge to keep that attention to what you're doing. And
yeah, that was like the day that Challenger exploded, we were actually slated. There were 3 other vocalists and we had a barbershop quartet version of the anthem, and we were actually slated to sing the national anthem at a function at Randolph Air Force Base that morning. And so as we walked in, people were walking out of the club, and we could see that they were pretty distraught. And so we started asking what was going on, and they told us that Challenger had just exploded. And then several days later, we got the call to do the memorial service. And so, you have all that just kind of surging through you at the time. And that's probably the hardest anthem performance I think I ever had to do.
So your next assignment was Alaska. Maybe tell us a little bit about there.
Well, I was in Alaska. As soon as I got up there, I was in for an adventure. I'd always wanted to go to Alaska, and it was a great opportunity. I spent 3 years there. And when I first got there, I didn't know that, I knew there were some differences between Air Force bands and how they operated and size and structure. But one of the unique things about being assigned to the band at Ellendorf was that they were very tied into the base there as well. So we had to source 10% of our members for security force duty. And the old, you can either volunteer or be voluntold. So I didn't volunteer, I got voluntold. So I spent 3 years off and on working for the security forces as well. So it's interesting to see that side of it. And, as a bandsman, folks kind of chuckle, oh, you're in the band. So, you want to put your best foot forward and do everything you need to do to make sure that you represent not just yourself, but the band well. And so I spent 3 years doing that and learned a lot. I learned that I never wanted to be part of security forces. As a career field, when mistakes happen, security forces can kind of eat their young, but, that's the environment they live in. But I enjoyed that, learned quite a bit. And it's really where I got to cut my teeth on being in the financial side of things for the bands. I kind of started that in Lackland, but when I got to Alaska, Chief Lyle Cook, Cookie as we called him, he gave me the reins to kind of learn the budget system, really get my hands dirty and really delve into that. So I really cut my teeth on learning the budget system for the Air Force right there.
What would you say were some of the biggest challenges with that undertaking? Maybe
Well,
in general, some of the challenges we face with budgeting and making sure that resource allocation is.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much that goes into it, and really understanding how everything goes together. Lucky for me, I could go over to the budget office there at Ellendorf, and the gentleman that ran the program for the command was right there. So I had a great mentor. His name was Marv Boyd. He's since passed a number of years ago, but he was such a great mentor for me. And he was prior service, but now in that role as a civilian. So he really taught me, these are the things you need to look out for. This is what you need to understand. And then he really taught me well about how to go in and fight for funding. What kind of, beans, bullets, blankets, bands, how do you compete? And so he really gave me a background on that. And I think he and Chief Cook were both very instrumental. I was very fortunate to be a bandsman who got selected as the Resource Advisor of the Year for the command. So I think there was one other individual that had that, and that was Chief Master Sergeant Antulio Garza. I think he was selected as a Resource Advisor for, I want to say, McGuire Air Force Base. So to be selected for such a high award for something outside your, your given AFSC, that was, I really give that a lot of credit to Chief Cook and Mr. Marv Boyd for that.
Thanks for clarifying. I wasn't sure. I thought at first that that was internal in the band that you were the RA there, but
I was, and then got nominated for a command, not just the base, but the command award.
Yeah.
So, and Mr. Boyd, he really taught me well. He, like I said, he really taught me how to go in and how to be able to articulate your case for funding, and how to really, I guess, open things up. So the hardest thing I think for some Air Force bands when it comes to funding is getting folks on the other side of the table to understand what it takes to run your mission. Sometimes you really have to know what you need inside and out, because you're going to get grilled. And I think that's really where the rubber hits the road. And a lot of this is you have to know what you need and how you articulate that to the folks above you. And then obviously, I would say most of the 4-star generals, most of them that run the commands, they get it when it comes to bands. It's that layer below down to the unit level. Sometimes that gets lost in translation on the effectiveness and how powerful Air Force bands can be. And so, in building these relationships with folks internally and externally, it really gives the Air Force band legs to grow and legs to stand on, and other folks become your advocates instead of you being your advocate all the time.
That's great. And so I'm sure you brought all that back to the band once you were done with your assignment. How long was that?
I spent 3 years there. I was there from 87 to 90. And then I showed up at, I was sent to Scott Air Force Base. And I spent, I was there for about 6.5 years. And it was great because I was close to home. So that was great. The band there, wow, being right there at that time was Military Airlift Command, transitioned to Air Mobility Command. We had a lot of great advocates there. Of course, US Transcom was there. And so I first started really learning the hard way about airlift and how all that worked. And then, what it took to kind of get some of that. The Air Force Band at Scott was, we had some really neat opportunities. We got asked to go to Europe in 1995 to play for Queen Beatrix of the Netherlands. And we were there as part of the 50th anniversary of the end of World War II. So that was really my first venture overseas, as far as, outside the continental United States. And so what an opportunity to be on a barge in front of the Queen on the Amstel River there in Amsterdam. And the streets are just lined with people all up and down the canals. And that was my real first taste of what Europe might be like. And I thought, wow, I'd really like to get there at some point. So, but I did actually. As soon as I finished my assignment in Illinois, I thought, well, I've got an opportunity to maybe stay close to home for maybe a few more years. So there was a special program out there at the time where if you'd been on station long enough, you could actually request to move to another location. So I requested to move to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And I was there at Wright-Patterson from the fall of '96 until July of '99. And that was a fully packed almost 3 years there for me. Really got my teeth. Really got to cut my teeth in a leadership role there. Showed up, and I thought, I've been a vocalist. I've been in a concert band, jazz band. Maybe I'll get a chance to run a pop group or something. And I showed up, and they said, "We have an opportunity for you." And I thought, great. They said, "We want you to run the concert band." And I said, "I'm a vocalist." And they said, "We know. And, but, we want you to run the concert band." I said, I was hoping to cut my teeth on a pop group or something first. And, that was met with laughter. And they said, "Well, this is where we need you." And I looked at the chief. His name was Tony Wack. And I said, "Chief," I said, "I don't want to make a mistake." And he said, "Just do the right thing. And if you have any questions, come back and see me. We'll chit chat about it. But just make the right call, do the right thing." And so I ran the concert band for a while, and that was really interesting. I mean, I enjoyed it. And I also played in the battery. So I'd go back and, play in percussion, cymbals, bass drum. I was also the drum major for a while. And so I loved that part of it. That was really neat. And then I transitioned over to USAFE. So.
It's also a little bit about that. I know Germany is a fantastic place to be, and you got a little itch of it earlier going over to Europe. And so now and then at this point, what rank were you when you were at Wright-Patterson and going to USAFE?
Well, when I left Texas, I was a buck sergeant. I was a buck sergeant. When I got to Alaska, then I got promoted in '88 to staff sergeant. Got to Scott Air Force Base as a staff sergeant, got promoted to tech. And when I got to Wright-Patterson, I got promoted to master sergeant. And that was one of the best practical jokes that got played on me. After going to the concert band and running that group and just kind of learning that side of things, my commander called me in the day of promotions, and he was meeting with every individual that had tested just to kind of talk to them privately. And so he and the chief set this up, and I walked in. He said, "Well, how you feel about today?" And I said, "Well, I'm nervous. I'd love to be picked up, but He said, "Well, you didn't make it." And I thought, well, doggone it. And then he started laughing, and he pulled a set of Master Sergeant stripes from behind his back. And He said, well, here you go. He said, you did get picked up. And that was, oof. I still remember that day because I was so caught off guard. I was thinking, oh, maybe I didn't test well enough. And boy, they knew all along, boy, they set me up perfectly. So that was a great moment. And then when I transitioned to Europe, I was a master sergeant. And then while I was in Europe, I got picked up for senior and chief, and very thankful I got picked up first time out for both of those.
But it sounds like you had paved the way for yourself by taking a lot of leadership positions along the way. It sounded like, so at Alaska, you would have been, you said, a buck sergeant at that point?
Mm-hmm, I was.
But you were working outside the band with, a resource allocation, RA, I believe you said. And so you already were digging into, or was that where you were security forces, or did you do both there? I'm trying to.
Well, I was in the band, but there were times I'd come off the road and I'd get a phone call in the middle of the night. You need to report for guard mount at 0530.
Yeah.
And, and sometimes we flew, sometimes we rode by bus, sometimes we took small aircraft to different places throughout Alaska. But, so that was just a part-time thing for me with the security forces. When the security forces rolled out from the base and they would play war games, they called in the augmentees and we would have to go guard assets.
Yeah.
And so I was weapons qualified, and in that process, I was still a performer. I was still running the band's budget, and I was trying to still, learn and test for promotion, all that stuff as well.
Yeah.
Great opportunities. I have a lot of folks that really, you never get anywhere by yourself.
Yeah.
And if you think you do, you're blind. But I had folks that, they gave me opportunities and I tried to make the most of those. I had folks that drug me along, whether I wanted to be in that position or not, because they said, this will be great for you. And folks that just, they push you, they pull you, they help you, and they point you in the right direction. And I was just very fortunate to be in the right place at the right time for some of those things.
And that's a theme I've heard from, I would say, most, if not all, the chiefs that I've interviewed. The common theme of find your good mentors. Sometimes they come to you naturally. Sometimes you have to seek them out, but aligning yourself, with the right people to make sure you're getting that education and opportunity to allow for, if you want it, to reach up the ladder and make some real change. And it sounds like you got those opportunities. You got some really key people that you could work with and gain the knowledge you were looking for.
Yeah, I mean, that was definitely, I was very fortunate in that aspect that, folks would see something in me and they'd say, let's try you at this. Because I first started off doing some admin work at Lackland. But then I love numbers. I always love numbers. And they said, hey, have you ever thought about how would you think about maybe learning the budget? And so that's where I started, was at Lackland, but I really cut my teeth in Alaska. And like I said, just some great folks that really helped me along the way.
So now you're in Germany and you have risen to chief. What are the new challenges now that you've entered? Now you're managing a band. So for those that don't know, the chief is the band manager, is typically the title for a chief. And so you now are responsible for all the knuckleheads. or I don't know if you know Chief Basket, Chief Master Basket.
I know Chief, yep.
I think he's looking to come out with a book called Herding Cats. And it's about cats being like jazz musicians. So how do you herd the cats? How do you herd the musicians? And it can be a challenge because, many of us have, our own opinions. And
well, one of the things I was really fortunate enough to do before I came in the service was I worked for my father. My father had his own construction business. So I was getting an education on how to deal with people that were my bosses. And like I saw my dad deal with some of his bosses. I saw my dad deal with his work crew on the construction site. And I saw him deal with other vendors. And I saw him deal with people that were outside of work, that were friends or colleagues or associates in some form or fashion. So really, I got a real big education on how to deal with folks when it came to watching my father, but not really picking up on it at the time, thinking, oh, that's a data point, I can file that away. But as I got into some of those leadership positions, like at Wright Patterson and with the budget, sometimes the thought would come to me, what would my dad do? How would dad approach this? And then those life lessons that I kind of just filed away without realizing it started coming back to me. When I would have to deal with some superiors outside the organization, what's the appropriate way to approach them? How do I talk to them about this? Especially when, like I said, when you start fighting for resources and with your budgets, how can you articulate your case? So those life lessons I picked up from dad, I really didn't realize it till I was well into my career. And then once I realized that, then I started remembering those conversations I had with my mentors when I first came in, and I had those data points filed away. So it really just kind of became a fabric that went together like this. So, but, being picked up as a chief, it's overwhelming. It's because it really dawns on you when you get picked up, it's one thing. When you put your stripe on, it's another. And I was at the very tail end. I was, I think, 20 from the end from all the selections that year. And it is really overwhelming because you feel such responsibility for those around you. And, on one hand, you feel like you're under a microscope, but on the other hand, you feel this awesome sense of responsibility to not let your folks down, to not let your commander down, to not let your, the folks in the unit down. And that's a huge challenge. But it's one that you want to do well. And, and I hope that, time has done that. I have done that over time. So, but yeah, absolutely incredible to put that stripe on. And, really it took me back to Lackland Air Force Base. My very first Chief Master Sergeant was Clark Hagan. And I remember Clark was such a man of integrity, and I really admired him. And when Clark was not a Chief Master Sergeant in the Air Force, he was an ordained minister. And he actually married a couple of members, a member of the band with his spouse. And, but I always thought back about my chiefs, Clark Hagan, Lyle Cook, Marty Luke, Tony Wack. I mean, just guys, Bob Fuller, guys that just really were great. And then I came to meet other chiefs along the way, Chief Vasquez, and other folks that were with me on different assignments. They started getting picked up for chief. So it's, you hang around good people, you learn some life lessons, and you may get an opportunity to go up the ladder. And if you do, great. And if you do, make the most of it and do everything you can do to help somebody else. I think that's kind of what you have to, that's how you have to look at it. Do everything you can do to help someone else. And it was great to be in a position to do that.
Being in that position, what would you say were the most effective ways of going about being a band manager, communicating with, people with different backgrounds and all of that?
Well, folks, I think you have to understand that everybody's wired differently. And just because you may think something doesn't mean that it's true. You might have some facet of it that might be, but, you have to hear folks openly, not be judgmental about it, and take all the information in before you do something. And I can tell you, I don't think there's any of us out there that didn't jump too soon, didn't jump to a conclusion too soon, didn't make, the best decision. We've all crossed that bridge. But still, you just have to realize every situation is different. And I always learned this from my dad. What else could it be? When somebody's having a bad day or something's not going right, what else could be going on? And so I think, once again, it's a data point I learned that could be very useful, and you just kind of put it in your tool bag. And so I think that's one of the biggest things is everybody's wired differently. It's like some folks, they understand by listening, some understand by visual, and some understand, you know, they may have some other form of understanding a concept.
Changing course a little bit, what were some of the most memorable moments while you're in Germany? I know it's a very special assignment. You have a large AOR, and it's obviously outside the United States, so you're engaging with a lot of people that aren't Americans, and so there's some very unique opportunities there. I'm sure some very cool experiences, and maybe
Right.
share a couple of those with us if you don't mind.
Well, you know, I was in Europe when 9/11 occurred. And as a matter of fact, due to the time differential, I was actually sitting in the bowling alley at CMSgt Air Base having a hamburger because it was lunchtime there. And I had taken a late lunch that day. And, you know, my phone went off and I thought, uh-oh. And I'm watching TV as I'm having a hamburger and I see what's transpiring on TV in real time. And I'm thinking, oh, that can't be real. That's got to be staged. Something's not right. And then my phone started going off and I thought, oh, this can't be good. And it was my commander. And it was Colonel Leyendecker. And he said, hey, bud, I'm going to need you to come back here ASAP. I said, yes, sir. And I got back, and that's when they started shutting everything down. So it was interesting to be in Europe at that time. When I first got there in 99, they were transitioning out of their country currencies into the euro. So from a financial standpoint, that was kind of interesting to go through that. Then 9/11. Had some really neat opportunities. Had a chance to meet Olivia de Havilland. She just passed away recently, and had a chance to meet her in Mons, Belgium. We were doing a private function for the Supreme Allied Commander of Europe, and so that was neat. And I got started in the guest artist business while I was in Europe. And as soon as 9/11 happened, we got a phone call from a retired chief here at the band at Robbins named Dave Ballingy. And Dave was the deputy director of operations. And Colonel Leyendecker brought me in. He said, hey, look, he said, they need some support and I want you to go with them. SecDef has called and said they're going to bring some folks over. And he said, I want you to go help them out with this. So it was Operation Patriot Greetings, I think, OPG. And the Secretary of Defense, they brought over Clint Black, the New England Patriot cheerleaders, Al Franken before he ran for office. He's still in a comedian status at that point. And some other folks. And so we went to several different spots in a couple of days. And we had about a week to put everything together. And then after that, Colonel Leyendecker said, hey, look, I want you to go with these folks from Robbins, and they're going to do this operation called Operation Season's Greetings. And I want you to let me know if you think this is a worthwhile thing that we should partner with them when they want to come over to the AOR. So I cut my teeth with that, and that was in November of 2001. So having all that come up, and I was still, I think I just got picked up for Senior Master Sergeant at that point. And then started in with that. But yeah, Europe was just a whole host of experiences, both on and off duty.
Yeah.
Really got to see a lot of the country. And it was great for my kids to get that education to be involved in international flair. I had the same landlord for 6 years. So that was great, getting to really learn about my my landlord's family. And can I show you this?
Oh, absolutely.
So for 6 years, when I first got to Germany, I bought a Opel Senator, which is kind of a Chevrolet make. So the Opel Senator was the first car that I had when I was there. And although my landlord and his wife spoke English, my landlord's wife's father did not, and they lived adjacent. And so I would pass him every day on the street and going toward the bakery. So I would speak German to him and he would speak back. And so we would communicate that way. And at the end of my 6 years in Europe, before I got ready to go, one day there was a knock at my door. And I opened up the door, and it's Barrett. It's the father-in-law of my landlord, and he had been practicing English for almost 6 weeks.
Wow.
And he handed me this car, and he said, "This, your first car in Germany?" He said, "We make it for you." And he said, "You have been good neighbor." And it still brings back a lot of memories. So I actually ended up getting rid of my car, but what I did was I kept the key to my Opel Senator, and it's taped to the bottom of this model.
Yeah.
So I mean, you know, such a great experience in Europe to learn things culturally. I was so fluent in German at one point, I could almost pass for German. And so that was, you know, just getting to travel all throughout. It's the relationships that the Air Force was able to broker and partner with others. You know, Italy, I even went down to Africa, and I was into the desert several times. So, you know, the Air Force had some great things that they wanted us to go do to further partnerships, to open new doors. And it was just a lifetime of experience, and really a lifetime of experience in 6 years that I wouldn't trade for anything at all.
Maybe share your thoughts on, you know, so 9/11 happened while you were there. It may have been helpful to have the musicians out after, when it was appropriate, to maybe bring a sense of, hey, you know, America's still here, we're gonna, you know, deal with this situation, and showing that face, that soft power of the military, when people, I'm sure, were very much on, you know, on edge about, you know, what could happen and what was happening. And you know,
well, one of the first things we did after 9/11, when, you know, they finally started looking at, you know, how do you get back out and how do you do X, Y, and Z, we actually had an opportunity with the U-Safety Band to go partner with the Luxembourg Army Band. And Colonel Leyendecker said, "Look, this is, I can't tell you exactly who we're going to be playing for yet, but, you know, we need to go over." And he said, "I need to go over and work with their folks before we bring our folks over." He said, "So I want you to go with me." And I said, "Okay." So it's a kind of tongue-in-cheek funny too, because, so, you know, at that point they wanted you to travel in civilian clothes and, you know, not have your uniforms visible, because, you know, nobody knew what was going to go on. So Colonel Leyendecker and I traveled over to Luxembourg, and so he started in, you know, rehearsing what we were going to do for this joint venture. And I remember I thought, well, I've got a black suit and stuff, so I'll just dress in black. So I went in, and I'm just standing and watching the rehearsal, and listening to things, and watch the colonel. I'm just quietly walking through the room. And at one point, they finally stopped me and they said, "Excuse me." I said, "Yes." Said, "What is it like to be the colonel's bodyguard?" And I said, "I'm not the colonel's bodyguard." So they, because I was dressed all in black and I was quiet the whole time, I guess they just thought I was his bodyguard. I mean, I'm 6'6", so I'm sure I thought at that point that, oh my gosh, I must have scared these people half to death. So, but little did I know that we were performing for the Grand Duke of Luxembourg. And that was one of the first performances we did as the U-Safety Band after 9/11. And so getting back out and getting into the community, and obviously, you know, things keep rolling, leadership changes. And then we had a 4-star general that came in named Doc Fogelsong. And General Fogelsong saw an opportunity for us to do some things in Africa that hadn't been done before. And so he said, "Look, I want the band to go with me, and I want them to, we're going to take a KC-135, and we're going to put you on it, and we're going to go visit some countries, and we're going to talk to some folks, and let's go do some good things." And he was really excited about doing it. And so we went to Ghana, Nigeria, Namibia, Algeria, and those were just really neat experiences. And you got to see some things that, never ever did I think I'd be a guest of, the Algerian Air Force. Never did I think I'd be in Ghana. And then to be in Nigeria and Namibia, it was just really a world of experience.
Do you have a particular memorable performance there?
Actually, we went to South Africa as well. We were in Pretoria, and we did they were in the process of trying to do some work for, the local government was working with an orphanage. And if I remember correctly, I just think it wasn't a good situation for these kids, and they were trying to bring them to a better environment. And one of the things that we did was we went and, they wanted to know about, the Air Force and what do we do. And so you get a chance to do some one-on-one and hands-on training, and you talk to the kids about, what the Air Force has done for us. And we were there to help the locals tie everything together to build a better world for these kids. So that's very heartwarming. It's just amazing what you're able to do when partnerships, even going down to Italy. I can remember we actually got sent out to a community that was run by a local communist government, and they wanted us to go and just do some PR work out and around the base. And I remember this was early on when I got to Europe. I was a master sergeant at the time, and we did the performance, and it went off very well. The folks really liked us. And of course, in Italy, everything happens later at night. Dinner happens at 10 o'clock instead of 7, 8 o'clock. So we get done with this concert, and we're still meeting with the folks that were our sponsors, and we have an interpreter with us. And she says, well, they want to take you out for dinner. And she said, it'd be best if you said yes. We don't want to say no. Great opportunity to build some bridges here. And I said, okay. And so we went, and I'm looking at this sign, and it says the Sacco and Vanzetti Cafe. I'm like, So here we are in a communist-run area. Of course, Sacco and Vanzetti were two Italians who were executed in the United States early 1900s. And so it hasn't dawned on me that the significance of being there. And so we're there, and they start asking us questions about, America. Tell us about the United States. Tell us where you're from. And tell us about growing up there. And so they wanted to hear all these opportunities. How did you get involved in the Air Force? And so, each one of us kind of had our own story. And it was 2 a.m. in the morning. And they were just they loved hearing about America. And I can remember one of the leaders said, would you do us the honor, and would you sing your national anthem for us? And so Deborah Jameson, James Brown, and I sang our national anthem at 2 a.m. in the Sacco and Vanzetti Cafe. And it was hard not to have a tear in your eye, because here's people wanting to hear your national anthem. And it just made you proud, You're like, well, we've done some good here.
Yeah, those connections are really what, at least for me, being early on, when I got it, I didn't really know what this whole military thing was all about. But when you make those really intimate connections with people, be them veterans or people of a foreign country, and maybe going through something like you said, being under a certain style of government, it's really cool to see the reactions that they have, and that's very tangible effect that you can see and experience as a musician representing the Air Force.
Yeah, well, the thing is, and this goes back to, whether it's in Africa, whether it's in any other part of the world, whether you speak the language or not, music is such a universal language. And when you can use that to open doors, music was our way with the Luxembourg Army Band. Music was the common language, for us to use when we were in South Africa. Music was the language that helped open up, the conversation, the dialogue there in that little Italian province that night. And so the power of music is, it's underestimated, really. And I think that's one of the things that the Air Force Band has done and continues to do, is to use that message in a way that's positive. It's positive, it's professional, and it helps open hearts and minds. And when you can do that, you can open a lot of doors, and you can break down barriers. And sometimes it's barriers you didn't even know existed, but it's just in that instant, when you're on the same page, that's one of those things that it can just do such a world of good. And I think that's, years ago, we were one of the few presences out there with Air Force recruiters. We were the blue suiters that people in the community saw along with recruiters. And at one time we had a great relationship with the recruiting services. And that was a way to, it helped their numbers, obviously, with us partnering with them. But it's a way for America to stay connected with the service and the service with the population. And they're dependent on one another, whether any of us really realize it or not. As long as you have that presence in the community, people know that you're there. Yeah. And when you don't have that presence there, like, COVID, you guys have some huge challenges right now. And, your role is to be out and active among the population. And so how do you effectively do that in a safe environment? So.
Yeah, we're definitely trying our best to be creative right now. The challenges, waiting for things to open up. Well, speaking of opening doors, as we start to bring you towards the end of your Air Force career, you said you became a member of the guest artist program associated with Robbins.
Started working with guest artists, and then when I left Europe, Dave Ballingy, who was running the guest artist program out of Robbins, Dave said, "Hey, what do you think about coming to Europe, or what do you think about coming out of Europe and coming here to Robbins?" And I said, "Wow, that'd be great." And he said, "Yeah." He said, "I'm not going to do this forever." And he said, "I really think it'd be important for you to continue." So I came down here, and I got here in the summer of 2005 and retired in 2012. And in that stretch of, that 7-year stretch, I mean, my gosh, just the opportunities I had. I worked with Winona Judd 3 times. I worked with Josh Turner, Little Big Town. Dave retired from civil service. He was retired chief. He retired from civil service after that. And then so I got involved even deeper after Dave retired. And so my first tour to grow my legs on was with Kid Rock and Carlos Mencia. And then my last tour I did officially was with Chris Daughtry and a comedian named Gabriel Iglesias. Yeah. So that was my last official tour. And then my last official show that we did at the Opry was with Little Big Town and Leanne Womack. Yeah. So great opportunities. It opened up some doors. Ironically, it was interesting I really kind of first heard about Little Big Town in the fall of 2006. Didn't know a whole lot about them, and went down to hear them in Macon, Georgia. And I thought, wow, that'd be neat. I wonder if we could ever talk them into doing a show with us, because the shows that we did at the Opry were recorded for Armed Forces Radio and Television Service. And those would be broadcast out on Christmas Day all throughout the world, all across AFN channels, all ships at sea, the embassies. And so I can remember we went up and pitched the idea to their management team. And lucky for me, I had, after we heard them in Macon, I went back out by where their bus was, and the female singer with the blonde hair, Kimberly, was out back. And I said, "Would you mind autographing this T-shirt for me?" And she said, "No, not at all." I said, matter of fact, if it wouldn't be too much trouble, do you think the rest of the band might be willing to sign that? And she said, I don't know, I'll check. So she took the t-shirt, came back. And so while we were in the meeting with their management team 5 years later, I conveyed to them that story about meeting Kimberly and how gracious she was to take the shirt and have it signed. And they went back and told them, they said, you know what, that sounds like a great opportunity. Let's do that.
Yeah.
So they signed on to do the show at the Opry House with us.
That's awesome. What would you say is kind of some of the big lessons or things that you learned from working with the guest artists? Because, you know, we're all professionals, but they're, you know, professionals on a different, different level. And so I'm sure there was a lot of very fast-paced preparation type stuff and just maybe interactions that we're not used to when we're working internally versus working with a guest artist and on maybe a large stage and venue.
Well, I think for a lot of the guest artists that we work with, it was pretty simple.
Yeah.
I think sometimes we complicate things and we don't have to. But I think the main thing with guest artists, they want information. They want information correct the first time. They don't like curveballs. And if you do have a curveball, there better be a legitimate reason as to why.
Yeah.
And there are some that, depending on what their contracts look like, you know, they had some interesting requirements.
Yeah.
But I'd say for the most part, they're human, you know, they're human beings like we are. They, you know, they're still dealing with family life while they're performing. So that was one of the neat things you could kind of see was, you know, they're just like you and I.
Yeah.
They go through family struggles like everybody else. You know, they miss being home, but they love what they do for a living. And I think that was really comforting to see, is that, you know, there's a human side to all of them.
Yeah.
And the question is, were some of them willing to show that? And for those that was great. And some were really all business. But you know, it's one of those things. There were artists that they wanted only their band, but there were other artists that wanted to integrate. And so I think when we could integrate, we could show them the real talent of the Air Force musicians. And we saw that with Hootie and the Blowfish. You know, there are several folks that I know and that were in the Air Force band program with us, that if Darius Rucker or Hootie and the Blowfish were out on the road and they called them up and said, hey, I'd like to come see you, they may get asked to sit in with them.
Yeah.
And, you know, that was a thing about showcasing the Air Force too, was when you could integrate with them. I think Little Big Town learned that, you know, when we could put out the full band along with them. They were like, well, you know, we're used to working with the rhythm section and, you know, not a whole lot more. But when we showed them what we could do with a large concert band, you know, have all that integrated, I mean, it makes their eyes pop. And that was the great thing about working with a guest artist, because then they're like, well, you know what, you guys are really good. And then, you know, you start talking about other folks and you start to hear their stories like, well, you know, matter of fact, your guitar player that plays with you used to be in the service band at one point.
Yeah.
There was a kid he ended up being the keyboard player for George Strait for a number of years.
Wow.
So, I mean, the Air Force band has a huge amount of talent, and the talent pool continues to grow and grow every single year, no doubt. I mean, it just grew exponentially from the time that I came in. And the folks are so talented.
Yeah.
And they continue to be. And I think you guys have a bright future. And, you know, keep doing what you're doing, because you make a difference.
Yeah.
And even in the days when you think, oh, you know, does all this really matter? Yes, it does.
Yeah.
It absolutely does. You make a huge difference.
And it sounds like from your experience that if you embrace it, as long as it's healthy, there's a healthy amount of musical social pressure. So, you know, you start in a pop group and then next thing you know, you're singing with a jazz band, you were nervous, but you had, you know, a welcoming environment that you could learn in. You know, obviously we want to still bring our best, but it wasn't like, you know, just throw you in the deep end and leave you. There was support along the way, you know, or when you were running the concert band and you're like, hey, I'm a vocalist. They say, yes, you're going to run the concert band, but we're here for you. You know,
Right.
you use this as a tool. So I think that's important. That I think I'm realizing is that, you know, take those steps and maybe don't be fearful necessarily of some off the beaten path or things you don't think you were going to be involved with, and you know, find your mentors to get the job done, and you know, embrace those challenges that can lead to other things as well.
Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe to change it up a little bit before we end the interview, a couple things I like to ask in these interviews is your most memorable experience / performance, which may have been one you've already told or a new one, and then maybe the same event but a funny story. So maybe a particularly funny moment. I was going to ask about maybe maybe one of the odd requests I'm sure that guest artists ask, but there might be a, you know, statute of limitations or NDA catch. So
Extending contractual obligations.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you, one of the most memorable events for me was during a guest artist tour in 2001, actually 2002. 2002, a country group by the name of Restless Heart went on the road with us for Operation Season Screenings. And they've been one of my favorite groups for a number of years, and they broke into the country charts, you know, late 70s, early 80s, had a string of hits. And one of their songs was When She Cries by them, and their drummer, John Dietrich, actually sings the song. So I was talking to he was the road manager at the time and also ran audio for them. And he said, well, I can tell you're a huge fan. I said, oh yeah. I said, you know, When She Cries, I love it. It's just one of my favorite songs. And while we were on tour, it got announced that I got picked up for chief. And so the next year we were looking around, and Restless Heart called us and said, hey, we'd like to go on the road with you again. And I thought, well, that'll be neat. And so they went on the road with us. So Restless Heart actually sang the national anthem at my pinning ceremony for chief. And that night we played at Ramstein Air Base, and John Dietrich asked me, do you want to come up and split When She Cries with me and sing with me? And I thought, whew, pressure. And I said, yeah, absolutely. And that I just had the time of my life with that.
Yeah.
So that's to me is one of the most memorable performances I've ever been able to do, is just have that moment with them. I watched a little bit of Chief Vasquez's interview. And, you know, he talked about the self-actualization, and that's one of those moments when everything just locks and you go, yeah. And but as far as funny stories, I was in Europe at the time, and I got a phone call, and it's one of our trumpet players. He said, hey, I got a problem. I was wondering if you wouldn't mind helping me. And I said, okay. And I won't put his name out there, but the concert band was on the road. They were in Italy. And I said, what's the problem? And he said, I left my folder out, and it's in the main rehearsal hall. I said, okay. And he said, I don't have any parts at all. And he was first trumpet. And I said, okay. He said, do you mind going back to the unit, and can you fax me the parts? And I said, okay, when are you guys starting? He said, in about 30 minutes. And I live 10 minutes away. So literally, I drove to the base. I drove to CMSgt Air Base. I lived about 15 minutes away. Got to the building. The folder was exactly where it was, where he said it was. So I got it, and I had the order of the show was right there. I started faxing the parts. And the parts were going to a pizzeria that was in a plaza of where they were playing. And so this kept their fax machine tied up. All these the music coming through. And so he would call me back on a cell phone. Well, keep that part coming. He said, as soon as you pull them off, no kidding, we're taking them to the stand. And somebody here in the percussion section is pulling them off and running them back over my chair. So he made the show. They did the whole show, and they got all the parts. But the restaurant was not happy that the fax machine. He said they went through 3 rolls of fax paper.
Wow.
But they made the gig. It all came off.
More paper than pizza that day.
Yep. So
I was just thinking maybe like pizza orders would be coming in and mixed in between. You'd be flipping over to the next page. Oh, large pepperoni with.
Well, what happened was when it tied up their fax machine, they couldn't process any bills for payment.
Oh no!
It was tied in the same line.
Yeah.
So, but I think he probably paid the pizzeria out of his own pocket, probably a hefty sum to say thank you. We appreciate you.
Yeah.
So yeah, just great experiences though.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing your time and your wisdom and your career with us today. It's like I said before the interview started, this is just such a invaluable tool for us, for everybody really, but for us that are early on in our career to get some mentorship from those that have been there, done that, and thank you for continuing to be involved. And we'll have to, maybe we put up a clip of one of your performances or something attached to this video to maybe that one. I was thinking maybe that one with Dietrich in Europe would be pretty cool if there is.
I know there's footage of it somewhere. I don't have it, but yeah, we did record the show.
Yeah.
I will tell you one thing before I go, and I'll tell you an individual that made a huge difference in my life, and I was a staff sergeant at the time, and it was one of my commanders, and it was Colonel Bruce Jilks. He was a lieutenant colonel, and just recently been picked up for colonel, and he was getting ready to transition out to the academy band. And as we went through the line to say our goodbyes to him, he shook my hand and he said, "Don't underestimate your talent, your potential, or your abilities, because you're doing all 3 right now."
Yeah.
And that was a huge turning point for me, I think, in my life, personally and professionally.
Yeah.
And matter of fact, I wrote that out. I typed it out, and that was on my board, and it's here in the house with me.
Yeah.
But I still carry that to this day. So if I could tell anybody anything, the Air Force is a great career. I loved it. I wish I could still be a blue suiter. But for you folks out there, don't underestimate your talent, your potential, or your abilities.
Yeah. Thank you for that. That's great.
Thank you for the time today. I certainly appreciate it, and thank you. It's been an honor and a privilege.